Mage Among Superheroes by Halosty. Chapter 339. Some people might have said that of the three heads on the inappropriately sized necks, the wolf or bat heads were the dangerous ones. I wasn't so sure about that. I'd seen angry ducks before, and I did not want to make the mistake of underestimating it. That neck was also longer than the others. A good chain lightning might have been my response, but that would use up most of my remaining mana. Midnight split a chain lightning with me. With the spells we had both used, he should have enough mana left for altar portal at full power, same as me. Got it, Midnight said, gathering his 6.5 mana as I did the same. I continued down the slope, angling away from the bridge and the portal under it, as Strife flung quills at the various heads poking out of the portal. Fortunately, the full thing couldn't fit through just yet, but the portal seemed to be expanding slightly as it pushed against it. The first target was the duck head. Among other things, it was the least damaged, having avoided most of the quills from Strife or deflected them with its bill. It was also the closest to us physically, with the three heads being arranged perpendicular to the path beneath the bridge as they came out of the portal. Lightning arced through the air, changing its course as I directed it to reach my target. It struck the head pretty much dead on one side, and I pushed it through towards the bat head and then finally the wolf. There were horrible sounds that came from the mouths of the creatures. I still couldn't tell if the heads were connected or not, and I wasn't going to get to such an angle. Regardless, none of the sounds fit natural creatures. Not that I expected something with a duck head and random scales on its neck to be natural. And the tentacles in the bat's ears were probably not normal either. "Get behind the portal," I called. Midnight didn't need to acknowledge that, he just needed to hold on as I did that. The duck head tried to bite at us, but it was only capable of bending a bit further than 90 degrees to the side as it pressed against the edge of the portal. Which was too far, really. I'd kind of been counting on them following some rules of anatomy. Soon we were placed between the slope of the bridge and the portal, with about 5 feet of standing room. Strife had joined us, but she bore a look of concern. "I will not be able to assault the monsters from here." "Same for them, right?" I asked. Fortunately, the portal did have a backside that was not spewing out more scouring. "Also, you can totally toss some spines around that," I gestured to the vaguely visible flailing heads, "or stab the little guys crawling around towards us." Too bad the 3 large heads didn't fully block the gap. "We're going to close this portal." It had worked pretty well last time. Something I didn't want to fight was coming through one of these portals. I just hoped they hadn't learned from the experience. I had no idea how intelligent and cooperative the Scouring were. They did seem to have the ability to physically bully the portal wider, though hopefully that had something to do with their supernatural presence. With Midnight and myself, we should be able to handle it. I began to crack skulls, some of which weren't in the correct place at all, as beasts continued to crawl around the edge of the portal. With 2 people using altar portal, we should have been pretty effective. But I could feel we were wrestling against the 3 heads. We did manage to visibly stop the growth and shave off a few inches almost right away. Long necks turned at unnatural angles, eyes from the heads looking towards us as they continued to howl in pain and anger. They actually managed to get parts of them over the line of the portal, past the 90-degree angle, and I actually had to smack away the wolf head with my staff and take a half step back to stay out of its reach. The good news about that was that Strife was able to better target them, and they were getting a whole lot of magical rainbow quills in them. She continued her habit of targeting the eyes. A bit odd for someone with an eye patch. An eye patch that she didn't need, so that probably changed the circumstances significantly. Her depth perception seemed fine enough regardless. Eyes were weak, and there were somewhere around 10 of them between the 3 heads. I kicked away some sort of snake as I twisted the edges of the portal, trying to force it to close, even as I struggled against the 3 heads. Only 2 of them could effectively push against the edges of the portal at once, but the third was caught in the middle and provided a sort of stabilizing force as the portal shrunk to around 8 feet. I remembered some fancy tricks from before. I'd closed off portals from the center, and that had worked fairly well. The problem was that there was a whole bat head with a horrifyingly long neck there. Was that a problem? I didn't care what happened to it. And even if I needed an empty location to begin my work, there should at least be the inside of its throat. Hold the outside steady, I warned Midnight. Then I mentally yanked from the middle. I was careful not to go beyond my limits, though exactly which limits I was uncertain. I brushed against the edge of consciousness as my mana drained to near empty. I felt something hit the outside of the middle section of the portal, but it was far less durable than the rest of the bat. It hung for a moment and then the portal snapped outward. The two outer necks were caught on the edges of the remaining ring for a moment, before their efforts were hindered by a rapid flurry of impalements by Strife. Probably not enough to kill them, even with the scouring's seeming magic weakness, but sufficient. The necks lost a bit of supernatural tension, and the two sides of the portal decided that they were finally willing to move closer together, with the obvious results of that. I wondered if the magical girls here in Earth number 2 needed blood-cleaning services. Since their enemies rapidly dissolved into horrifying smoke, it would only be for their own blood, though. I continued to whack the remaining beasts that were biting and clawing at me. Stone skin was good, but they'd be through it quickly if I just let them. I didn't have much magic left, but Strife rather efficiently impaled most of those that remained, including those that I had wounded but not managed to kill. Well, I said, I'm fully out of mana. I can help bash anything left on the bridge if fried shrimp hasn't annihilated the rest of them, but I can't really get you guys back to that other battle. I wanted more mana. Was going into the negatives even that bad? I felt the presence of Midnight on my shoulder and restrained myself from further considering that path. If I was going to break magic, it wasn't going to be today, especially not when we were mostly victorious. After we climbed back up the slope, I helped take out easy targets near the back, and Midnight sniped some with his suit's lasers. As predicted, most of the enemies had been turned to ash. Well, or at least burned to death before the rest of the scouring thing happened, whatever that was. Excellent job, Mage, said Shield. Finding this portal and getting us here quickly likely saved many lives. However, some fiends have probably gone into the surrounding area. Could you help us track them down? Only in mundane fashions, I said. I have a pretty decent supernatural sense, but no mana left. I focused on what was going on around us. The strongest magic was in the magical girls, then my staff, then the lingering effects of defensive magic on myself and Midnight. More distantly, I sensed what I was certain was the other magical girls finishing their battle. I think there might be a few that way. I pointed down the street. But I can't guarantee that, or that it's all of them. We'll split up, Fried Shrimp said. Guide Strife there, we'll check for any others. Wand nodded. Any injuries? I looked at myself. A few punctures. A wave of her wand and the skin was sealed up with pink magic. I wouldn't say I was fully healed, but not bleeding was good. Thank you. You're welcome. I'll also split off and listen for any trouble. I can take a handful of the weaklings, she explained. That shouldn't be an issue. There at least wasn't anything particularly powerful or in large concentrations. We ran off with Strife towards what I had sensed, and there were indeed a few monsters terrorizing civilians. One woman tripped as she was running. Strife tossed a quill like a javelin, accurately striking her target from afar. Her subsequent attacks were slightly less accurate, but the primary target had been taken out, and Midnight helped blast some of the others while the woman scrambled to her feet. Thank you, she yelled as she continued to run away. Not a useless civilian, just an unfortunate one. We were faster, and we caught the last few beasts, one of which was just a lump of slimy, which left a weird grey trail on the ground. Maybe we could have followed that, but I hadn't noticed it from afar. Everything quickly calmed down, and we met up at the nearest safe house with the other magical girls. Since I was fully out of mana, I was actively absorbing more. It was worth the effort, though it wasn't a perfect meditation environment. After 10 minutes or so, I noticed something interesting. Hey, Midnight, the mana here feels a bit... He waited for me to say what I was going to, but it would be leading him to an answer, and I wanted to know if he thought the same or if it was just in my head. Just indicating something was weird might be too much, but he came to the same conclusion. Stronger, isn't it? Right, I said. It's still lower than the current new bay, but it was pretty close to standard, wasn't it? Maybe a bit above. Certainly, Midnight agreed. I'll add it to the log. That's a great idea. I had a number of data points that had made it into writing of some form that I had referenced a few times, but if we intentionally kept observations, we could be more accurate in the long run. Oh, there was something else. Those beasts were physically tearing open the portal. Metaphysically, maybe? I shrugged. Normally, that meant something different. Superphysically? Whatever. But that wasn't what I meant. When I was looking for the portal, something pushed away my scrying. Or someone, not from the portal, but from them, presumably. That is odd, Midnight said. Right? I guess I could have accidentally locked onto a magical girl. It's somewhat instinctive to resist scrying, though it's usually not that effective. That's why we have non-detection active all the time. It lasted pretty much all day, so it didn't need contingency or anything. It kept most of its potency until the very end, when it rapidly unraveled, which was why it was odd that it was at less than half strength now. Midnight, how's your non-detection? I had a pretty accurate judgment of the strength of effects on others, but Midnight should be better at judging his personally, or at least similarly effective. I think it's all normal, he tilted his head. Do you think there's something wrong with it? Mine's half depleted. Do you think one of those beasts ate magical effects? That was actually a pretty good possibility. However, I still have some flecks of stone skin active. They were clawing pretty aggressively, so if it was being directly weakened, I think I would have gotten more than a few punctures. Or at least my suit would have. I think it's something else. But what? Midnight asked. That's the big question, isn't it? I just had to figure out how to answer it. I'd probably need mana no matter what. Chapter 340. It would be nice if I had perfect recall of every moment of my life so I could review my memories with clarity at a convenient time. But I didn't, so I couldn't think of the past and determine if there was something that I simply didn't notice, or if it just didn't happen. Though perhaps some forms of perfect recall would only allow me to witness things I noticed in the moment. I wondered if there was a good spell for recalling memories. From what I knew, they were far better at removing them. Those were the sorts of spells that got people in big trouble if anyone knew about them. Not that I was interested anyway. When had my non-detection spell become half depleted? That was the important question. If it was before we came to Earth number 2, then I didn't have much to worry about. Here. Maybe somewhere else, though. If it was here, I really wanted to find out how and why. Excuse me. I turned my head to see Momo in normal human form. I understand you are in contemplation, but you should eat something. She held a tray of rice balls, which were still mostly not balls, but triangles. I could probably survive indefinitely on Power Brigade energy bars, but that didn't mean I wanted to. Nor did I actually carry enough for that. Thank you, I said. Food was good. Why didn't food give me mana? Or maybe it did. I'd never been hungry for long enough to test either way. But if that was the case, then did typical mana regeneration indicate an area with practically no ambient mana? That shouldn't be quite right. There was certainly some anywhere, and though I'd felt mana increase several-fold, regeneration increased similarly. Unless the amount of mana I felt wasn't actually directly proportional. Sounded like the sort of thing that would need weird super tech to test. I think one of the rice balls had tuna. Better than the canned stuff Midnight carried, but that was to be expected. That was just emergency rations. Does anyone here study magic? I asked Momo. In what way? Magical girls had a fairly instinctive understanding of their abilities. Practice still helps, of course, but there isn't much to study. I frowned. I'd think Humarans would, at least. Do you know of any magical girls with divination abilities? Scrying, far-seeing, or something similar? I couldn't know if magical terms would directly translate if I hadn't used them before. We were working off shared understandings, but that was imperfect even as translation continued to improve. Generally, we all have powers for directly fighting against the scouring, or for dealing with the consequences of their arrival. I remembered that all of them seemed to be able to repair the surroundings, which was why they didn't have to shut down whole streets or malls literally every day. It might be good for the construction economy, but it would be a bit tough on the local budgets. I don't know of anything like scrying, but the country is broad, though I suppose support types that specialize in tracking the scouring might count. Can they track anything else? I asked. Like, those ninjas? I don't believe so. Momo shook her head. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had such trouble with them. Speaking of trouble, I commented, have you had any more issues with them? There could still be portals around Earth number 2's Japan, theoretically. We hadn't even necessarily gotten rid of the last portal to Earth number 1, though that was something for my old world to deal with. I can't think of any incidents, Momo admitted. I could ask Lady Eglantine. Our companions are the ones who know most about non-local affairs. Speaking of which, is the scouring only an issue in Japan here? There are a few other locations with incidents, Momo said. Do not worry, the Humurans who came through were able to distribute themselves to select a companion. How did they get there? I asked. Can they teleport? Fly. Of course, said Lady Eglantine as the multicolored porcupine entered the room. If by fly you mean stow away on airplanes. That sounds a lot less mystical than I expected, I admitted. She shook her head, which sort of continued down the rest of her body through her tail. Even if all of us had the ability, it wouldn't be magically efficient. Unlike your powers, which seem practically boundless. I made a face. Are you kidding? I can only teleport 4 times. How many times in a day? Lady Eglantine asked. That would depend on mana regeneration rate, and if I woke up in the middle of the night. Approximate, something achievable under normal circumstances. Like 10? If I assumed the base of 6 mana per hour and a reasonable period of sleep, but also beginning in the morning with full mana. A limited pool and a high rate of recovery then. It's not that fast. How much energy do you think it takes to go around the planet? I don't really do that though. Teleportation takes some shortcuts. It's still not trivial. I shrugged. Probably not. How do people not notice you sneaking about? You forget that we appear only to those we choose, or with magical affinity. Here, those are effectively the same thing. She turned to Momo. You had a question? Well, Turlough did, Momo explained, about farsight and tracking abilities. How did she know to show up for that question? Momo hadn't texted or anything. Not that Humurans appeared to have phones. If I'd know, that would have been my first question. Clearly there was a different degree of empathy or mental communication than what I had with Midnight. We never got anything so clear as come answer a question. What I needed to know, I explained, was if there are any abilities people here might have that would interact with people like me, because one of my anti-detection abilities was tested. Lady Eglantine thought for some time after moving to sit on one of the pillows arrayed on the couch. It is possible. Would it trigger against friendly uses? How would you define friendly? I asked. Well, normally others with powers from Humurans, Lady Eglantine admitted. Do you see us as allies? Of course. But that doesn't mean my spell wouldn't stop people from looking. After all, by the time I know you're an ally, you have to have made contact and exchanged information which could in turn detect me somehow, right? I shrugged. Anyway, it works against everyone that doesn't have an intrinsic connection to me, by which I mean specifically Midnight. Then it is certainly possible someone looking for civilians in danger might have passed over you, or that an ability meant to find the scouring would wrestle with your abilities to some extent, finding foreign magic. But they're not magical, right? Not really. True. Boy, we didn't design our abilities to exclude most supernatural interference, just what we expected to exist. In short, other Humurans, and not exclusively. I nodded. Because of the bad ones. It's really very rare, Lady Eglantine said. Literally everyone in my first world has access to powers and thus has the potential to abuse them. Making mistakes with selection occasionally is fine compared to that. I see. Hopefully that information assuages your concerns at least. It didn't, really. There was some chance that someone accidentally brushed past me, but it seemed a bit more drained than that, unless their divination abilities were particularly strong. Midnight and I were going to stay a while, so I had him send a message back to the brigade. We needed to take some more time to gather lashes from different magical girls for testing purposes anyway, and for some reason not everyone was willing to give them up for the cause. even though eyelashes totally grew back. I wasn't asking for all of them, just 4 or 5 per lid. What if upper or lower were better? I doubted left or right eye would matter, but I had a bunch of different baggies getting labelled. We didn't want to have to come back here every day or something just to try to use contingency. Of course, rather than sending the message, we could have just gone back if I didn't have other things to do. One of those things was finding a time when the safe house restroom was available. That was where the biggest mirror would be. "What are you looking for?" Burning Shrimp asked. "You think there are more monsters out there?" I was quite certain that those would have been noticed, with the screams of people being attacked and all that. "Someone might have been looking for me," I explained. "Why are you here anyway?" "I need to make sure you don't do anything weird." What weird thing would I even do? Whatever, it wasn't like my magic was secret. This wasn't the best scrying mirror I'd ever had, but the best one wasn't a mirror and was in another dimension, so this was the option. Truthfully, I'd never had much luck with finding random magical things. I tended to focus on the strongest stuff. But in this case, that might be what I wanted. Especially if I looked for something that shared my sort of magic. I didn't have any reason to expect that except instinct. Maybe some extra-planar intruders came here. I gathered mana. Mist swirled on the mirror. Then, nothing. Midnight's tail flicked. What does that mean, you think? I had a pretty good idea, having felt the results firsthand. Earlier, I sensed something. Someone shoved me away. Now, there's nothing. "So they left?" Burning Shrimp asked. "Hardly. They just properly warded themselves. Getting a null result kind of means I actually found them. Or I would have probably locked onto something around here. Most likely, someone with a powerful non-detection spell." "Weird," Midnight said. "I would have expected something like those scrying anchors." "I think those are better for people who can't use magic," I explained, a workaround that Dr. Doomsday came up with. Burning Cupid frowned. I could see her in the reflection. "Is this Dr. Doomsday guy a villain?" "Obviously, he even chose his own name." She shivered slightly. "I don't like the sound of that at all." "Yeah, neither does anyone else. But he's very hard to take down. He creates the best supertech New Bay has ever seen." Apparently. Midnight had more to add. Most of it outdoes the actual advanced technology that the Martians and Selmothians have. Burning Cupid looked up at the sky. "Do you think there are Martians here? Here on Earth number 2 or on here on Mars?" "This is totally Earth number 1. Yours is the weird one," Burning Cupid said. "Anyway, in this dimension." "Humarans are from much further, right?" I confirmed. "Not this system, so hard to say. Gimme an hour and we'll figure it out." There weren't any Martians. Either that or they were really good at cloaking technology. However, Midnight didn't think so. "My suit's sensors don't detect any graphical artifacts," he explained. The bathroom was fairly roomy to begin with, but upon learning that we were going to look at Mars, we kind of got all the people and Humarans staying at the safe house, or those who were nearby, since most of them had better things to do than hang around all day. Usually, they just had 1 or 2 keeping the place safe and potentially keeping eyes on the weird extra-dimensional orc. I didn't think that was unreasonable, since even if we were friends, I did tend to find trouble. Though I didn't think it was my fault here, since they had so much on their own. "Wobble, stop getting in the way," Shield complained as her morphic metal companion pressed up against the mirror. "I wish to see that mountain over there. Surely there will be aliens." I shifted the view. Moving scrying about was something I was used to by now. Without a proper target except Mars, I'd ended up with a non-specific location, but it was clearly Mars. It looked just like the old pictures from Earth number 1. Not that I recognized anything specific, which might have been more suspicious. Lots of people were recording, even magical girls were interested in Mars, I guess. I kind of wanted to keep looking for whoever had non-detection, but bugging them more seemed unsafe. "All right, you should probably stop recording soon," I commented. "This is going to become a normal mirror again in a few seconds." There were a number of disappointed looks. Why were people so excited about Mars anyway? It was just another planet. It didn't even have people. Though if I thought about it, most of them had only seen Earth. Were there any rules about taking people from one foreign dimension to another? Would Extra even have to know? I wouldn't be good at lying, though, and it was probably better to not draw attention to them by going to the one world that had already crossed over with them. As for whoever was hiding here, I might stand a better chance finding them from Earth. At the very least, I'd be better shielded from potential retaliation.